Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time.
Welcome to another episode of FIN-LYT by EWA. Today, we're going to be covering a recent client case study that we've come across, a newer client that we've had the opportunity of bringing on into the firm. We've talked about a spectrum or a continuum of our clients, and we tend to hover on kind of on the either ends of the spectrum, where we have older clients, very high net worth, and younger clients, high income, and just kind of getting started on their financial journey. This particular case is more on the one end, where they're in a really great situation financially. They're high income earners, but they do have a lot of assets. And the question is how do they structure both their portfolio and their lives to reach their goals? So I'm here with Jamison Smith, a lead advisor on the team, and we're going to be covering their situation, how we approached it, how we uncovered their goals, and some of our recommendations to, again, help them reach their dreams. Okay, Jamison, fairly quickly, if you can, just provide a high-level overview of their situation, who they are, both financially and both as well as in their life.
Yeah. So just to piggyback on some of what you said, I would say this is more. A lot of our new clients are in this range. So let's call it 3 to 10 million in net worth in their 50s. 60s. And then again, we also have people which we can get even more perspective on. We have people in their 70s that are worth, 10, 20, 50 million. So kind of just giving that perspective to all of these different age groups and life stages is super helpful and impactful. But the lay of the land for them, again, I believe one spouse is late 40s, one's early 50s. So let's call it early 50s. About a $4.5 million net worth. Some of that's in real estate. So investable assets, I believe, was like $3 million of just like assets to manage, invest, what's actually liquid. And so their situation, very high income earners. One's an executive at a tech company. Total household income, I believe, is like $700,000-800,000 plus some bonuses and stock. Could be upwards closer to $1 million, depending on the year. They have one kid that is under the age of 10, and they had previously worked with a financial advisor for a long time. And so we hear this a lot, and a lot of times when I'm talking to when we're talking to new clients, I think it can become like you can get a roadblock of, well, they already have an advisor, they're taking care of, these people have all this money. And what we find a lot is just so far from true. They've had an advisor. The advisor's done, I would say, a very good job of investment management, managed the assets really well, but the financial planning was a little bit lacking as far as tax strategies, estate planning strategies, all of this stuff. So for them, again, call it $4.5 million net worth. The big thing, they really didn't know if they were on track or off track. They felt like a lot of people that get to this situation, they've done the things to earn a high income, and to accumulate a high net worth, they've saved a lot of money. They probably live below their means. And so what we really don't want is to never have these realizations and they get 10, 20 years down the road, $10, $20 million net worth, they've never spent any of it, and then their health goes and they never get to enjoy their wealth. So that's kind of the philosophy around a lot of this. But Devin, what would you say we'll talk about where the assets are and how they're broken up. What would you say their primary goals were?
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback on what you said earlier is that we see this a lot where people are earning a bunch of money. They've been working for 20 to 30 years. They've been saving a ton, but they're living well below their means, right? And not to disparage any other financial advisors or wealth managers out there, but investment management is obviously quite important. But sometimes it just comes down to understanding what you can spend to live your life today, so that you don't wake up at age 75 or 85 with far more money that you could ever spend or even give away. So that's what that's one aspect of financial planning, including the investment management. So anyways, in terms of their goals, I think that was a big one. So really the overarching theme with our discussions with them was where are we financially? Are we okay? When can we reach financial independence? And kind of what can we do with our cash flow in the meantime? And so some of the goals that they had off the top of my head were purchase a new car, an inexpensive fancy car, potentially buy a vacation home. For example, they really didn't know if that was something that they could or could not do. So we helped them with that. We'll get to that in a second. Additionally, they wanted to pay for college in full for their daughter. And then I believe financial independence was somewhere in the mid 60s for the one spouse and mid 50s for the other spouse. So reach financial independence for them on kind of separate timelines.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. To summarize, it was financial independence. One spouse probably would work into the 60s. Other spouse wants to retire in the next couple of years. Education for their daughter, and then a couple bigger purchases: vacation house, buying a car, and then also I think a big important thing for them was, again, daughter's under 10 years old, so maximizing the time now, traveling, experiences, spending money on that while they can, and knowing how much they can spend reasonably to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's talk first. Let's just go through state of the current balance sheet. So again, they worked with an advisor, a lot of cash building up, high income earners lived below their means, weren't really doing a ton with their extra money. So call it a couple $100,000 in cash between taxable investment accounts, call it $1 million, and then they had some miscellaneous stock from a previous employer, call it $400,000 in just concentrated company stock. That was a big question: is what do we do with this? About $150,000 in a 529 plan, and then across retirement accounts, about $1 million in an old IRA that was from an old employer pre-tax, and then between current employers, called about $500,000. Part of that's in a pension plan, and they also had a miscellaneous or two miscellaneous variable life insurance policies, which we'll hit on, but kind of spread out. This very common, called $1.5 million pre-tax, not really any Roth money, and then a lot in a taxable account. Anything to add there?
Yeah, we see this a lot where I liken it to whenever you move into a new house, especially maybe after you have kids, and you'll notice over the years, over the decade, you just build up stuff. And then either you shove it into the attic or shove it into the basement. You don't really think about it until it comes time to move. And we see this. So in this case, they changed advisors. So we get a new look at their balance sheet, and we realize there's a lot of cleaning up that we can do here. Yeah. And that's again, we'll talk about this more, but this is a lot of what we did in terms of the recommendations and part of their financial plan, just to really just kind of clean it up, consolidate it, and make things more clear and understanding for them, because unlike us, most people aren't financial professionals and can read a balance sheet like that. It can be confusing, and sometimes that confusion and that lack of wherewithal leads people to just throw their hands up in the air and not really create a plan.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing we talked about was, before we get into the financial independence, was just college. They've just been stocking money away in a 529. They want to be able to fund they live in the state of California, so a state school in California is far less expensive than other areas of the country. So, they may pay $10,000 to $15,000 a year, could be even cheaper. We estimated just a standard public school $25,000 a year. With that, with inflation, maybe they need about $200,000 for public school, and then we also ran the numbers for private school at $75,000 a year. Call that $550,000. So anywhere between $200,000 to $550,000 for college. I already have almost $150,000 in the 529. 529 is gonna be on track to have about $300,000 in when the kid gets to college. So, when we show them this, they're like, okay, we're behind. And it's like, well, we explained how 529s are taxed, and they had no idea. And if you put all the money in, accumulates tax free, use it for college, you don't pay any taxes for qualifying education expense. If you don't use it for college, basis comes out, pay taxes on the growth of your income rate plus a 10% penalty. They had no idea how that worked. So when they saw that, they said, well, we probably don't want to over-accumulate in a 529. So we said exactly what we'd recommend. No more 529 savings. Again, let's round up, say we need $600 for a private school for college. We want half of that in the 529. What's in there is going to grow to about $300. We're good. We're going to start saving $1,000 a month into just a taxable investment account earmarked for college. That gives flexibility. High likelihood half of it's needed for college. If the other half's not, they have that flexibility to use it for whatever they want to. If it is needed for college, they obviously can use it. So first recommendation, which was really eye-opening to them, was no more 529 funding right now. Put it into a brokerage account. And then down the road, let's say a couple years from now, they decide they want to do private high school or college, the kid wants to go to an Ivy League school, we can always put more money in the 529 later, but we don't want to run that risk of over accumulating. So anything to add on college?
No, it's just interesting that most people run the risk of under accumulating for their children's college savings, and they're in the opposite situation. So they're going to have plenty of money. The risk is that they give too much of it to the government in the form of taxes. So we're going to help allay those risks.
Yeah, so when we looked at financial independence, they could make no changes. And again, let's say they have about 30 a month coming in, more with bonus and everything, but just from a standard cash flow standpoint, 30 a month coming in. They're spending between 10 to 15. We told them 15 just to make sure they're intentionally spending more money. So 30 is coming in, 15 is being spent, 15 left over. If we just saved that and kept saving into the pre-tax retirement accounts, didn't do any Roth planning, they were on track for financial independence. Their goals were already on track for financial independence. They could retire, I believe one spouse could retire at 60, one could retire at 55. They could spend 15 to 20 a month, no issues there. Where we found a lot of opportunity was just tax efficiency. So what we recommended when we did some digging, one spouse has 403B in pension, flipped his 403B to Roth contributions because right now all their money's in a pre-tax environment, plus they're going to have a pension, Social Security. They're going to have a significant amount of income for retirement already. I believe the pension, Social Security are paying like 10 a month after taxes. So we don't want everything to come out of a taxed account in retirement, because your Medicare surcharge could go up, you're going to get bumped up in tax brackets. Who knows what taxes will be in the future? So first thing, switch the 403B to Roth funding. When we did some digging with the other spouse's 401k, they're able to do what's called a mega backdoor Roth. So $23,000, she's under 50, so $23,000 into Roth 401k, get the employer match, make the difference up to $69,000 in Roth. So just doing that alone is going to drop cash flow a little bit to about $26,000 a month, but now we're maximizing all of these Roth accounts. The next question is backdoor Roth and Roth conversion. So the one spouse doesn't have an IRA, $8,000 a year, he's over 50 into the backdoor Roth, about $1 million in a pre-tax IRA for the other spouse, and we can get fairly granular with this, but they had a donor advised fund that had about $10,000 and they hadn't really done anything with. They have a bunch of appreciated stock from this previous employer. So what we're going to do is take an amount of that stock, donate it to a donor advised fund, take the tax deduction, plus avoid capital gains taxes, and then we're going to take that same amount and convert it to Roth this year, and that Roth conversion is going to be no tax consequence because we've decreased the income with the donor advised fund. So that's a huge tax savings, helps them with their charitable aspirations, have a nice nest egg in a charitable account, plus we're getting money into Roth for tax-free growth. So those are kind of the high-level just tax strategies for retirement planning. Anything to add, Devin?
Not necessarily from a technical perspective, but just to kind of reiterate, is they have goals, and these tax strategies help them reach those goals even quicker than they could have imagined. So it might sound esoteric and wonky, but in reality, all this really means is that they're able to hit the financial independence goals sooner than they thought. So
yeah, and one of the big things for them was just realization of like, when we broke this down to them, again, they're spending probably 10 to 12 a month. We showed them spending 15, so more than they're used to. And one of the direct comments from one of the spouses was, "Wow, I can buy takeout tonight. I can buy the clothes I want." And you never think that people with a significant net worth would have those thoughts, but a lot of times people just don't know what they can and can't spend. Are they on track or off track? And showing them that, hey, you're on track to be able to retire in the next 5 years, whether you choose to or not. Like, legacy is not the most important thing. They want to leave some money to their daughter, but the main thing was education. They don't need a huge nest egg left. So it's like, hey, let's intentionally spend some of this money and enjoy life you're living now, which will piggyback into now the vacation house and the car purchase.
Yep, exactly.
So for the one spouse that his whole life wanted to buy like a $150,000 sports car, thought it would just be a bad decision. And when we modeled it out, has zero impact on their plan. You can buy it next year, doesn't impact any of their goals. It's not like they wanted to retire tomorrow anyway, so it literally doesn't matter. So that gave them peace of mind. Well, we can make this purchase, doesn't matter for our goals. And then the second decision was around a vacation house. And we got into running the numbers. A lot of times what we find is when you look at the carrying cost of a vacation house, they may not even want to buy it when they're in their 50s because they feel stuck to travel there. So we modeled out they could buy a $2 million house, with a $500,000 down payment, no impact on their retirement goals or education goals. But one of the realizations was, well, maybe we wouldn't buy this house until later in life, because we would actually travel there often. We want to be able to travel to different destinations the next 10 or 15 years. But really, it's giving them peace of mind that they could make all those decisions freely, and it's within the boundaries of their financial plan.
Yep, for sure. Okay, maybe switching over to some of the more sophisticated planning that we did in regards to trust and estate.
Yep.
So if you can kind of quickly overview what was going on with those scenarios and how we what recommendations we made.
Yeah. So before this will kind of play into that. So they have stock from an old employer, and one of their big questions is, what do we do with this from a tax standpoint? How do we diversify out? And there really wasn't. Some of it's going to go into the donor advised fund, the low basis stock, but then the rest of it basically just strategically diversifying out, using losses in the taxable account to offset some of the gains. But it was pretty much a conversation around, are you emotionally invested to this company at all? Answer was no. So what are you holding on for it for? And they said, we really don't have a reason. We just didn't really know how to sell it. So helping them liquidate that, because there's no emotional ties, just properly diversify into a different portfolio. But as far as the estate planning, outside of that stock, a previous company had got purchased by a private equity firm. And so they transferred the stock into new private equity stock. That the goal of the company, actually I think it's the company she's working at, is within the next 5 years to have a sell. They would sell to another private equity company. They could IPO. They could sell to a big tech company. All these options, but this stock could hit big. And so looking at their financial picture, based on continuing to work another 10 years, living below their means and their spending, most likely they're going to be at a place, again, we're speculating on future estate taxes, but my professional opinion is they're probably going to be lower in the future. So right now, $26 million between each spouse, roughly, can pass tax-free. Anything above that, 40% federal estate tax. Going to get cut in half after next year. Could drop even further. So, assuming they'll probably be over that if the estate tax drops, this private equity stock, I believe the basis on all of it is worth, it's about $100,000 right now, and it gets granted over this year and next year. But it's about $100,000 purchase price for these stock options, and if it hits, it could be like $1 million or $2 million asset. Based on their financial picture, wouldn't even model any of that in, knowing they're good to hit education goals, retirement goals, buy the house, buy the car. This money really, it matters from a standpoint of, obviously you want it to hit and you want the money, but from a financial planning standpoint, it doesn't impact their plan. So one strategy we're going to implement is taking that money and having a trust own the stock. So what that does is the cost of it now, which is about $100,000, we can get into the trust with gifting exemptions. Again, it's spread out over a couple years. So they could gift it into the trust under the gifting exemption, not use any of their estate exemption. And now what happens is the trust owns these, and it's a spousal life access trust. So each spouse has a trust. They have access to it because the spouse is the trustee. But if this thing hits to $2 million, it's all owned in the trust, so it's outside of the estate. It's an irrevocable trust, and none of that money is subject to the 40% federal estate tax. So we're going to discuss, do we put it all in? Do we put half in? Do you maybe want to use it? But that's one really nuanced strategy that could end up saving them, 40% estate tax, about $800,000 on estate taxes, which could be huge.
Yeah, and again, just to the point where kind of optimizing the tax situation will allow them to reach their goals, whatever they are, in kind of ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
typically,
for sure. And then they had already had estate documents drafted, which were just done last year. They were good. Had your revocable trusts, wills, powers of attorney, guardians. So all that stuff we kept. Just adding on two new trust documents for the slats to own the private equity investment.
What about their life insurance policies that they had on hand whenever they approached us, and what about what were our recommendations to kind of clean that up?
Yeah, this is a great question. So again, early 50s, young kid, they need life insurance just from a standpoint of, if something happens to one of them, especially the higher income earning spouse, that income's not coming in, still have to pay a mortgage, still have to save, still have to fund education. One spouse had $2.5 million of term insurance. We were okay with keeping that. That's adequate. Other spouse had 2 variable, non-guaranteed life insurance contracts, 2 different companies, and they were underwater. So meaning, I think they had, let's just say they've put in 50 grand and they're worth 30. So we really looked at this. What purpose are these things serving in your financial plan? Really none. They don't have an adequate death benefit. The spouse needs, between like 3 to 5 million of total life insurance. I believe it was like 100,000, maybe 150,000 of death benefit. So that wasn't adequate. And what we found with these non-guaranteed contracts is the mortality and expense cost generally is not fixed if it's not guaranteed. So what that means is the cost of the insurance will continue to go up as you age. And if you're not funding enough money into it, a lot of times these are pitched that the premiums are flexible. So you could decide to not fund it for a couple of years, which sounds great. But if you're not funding enough money in, the cash value is used to pay the M&E cost. And that could start to erode at the policy. So could have been a good thought process when it was put in place, but a lot of issues with this current life insurance. So what we ended up doing, we did what's called we transferred the life insurance into a variable annuity at Fidelity. And what that does, if there's a $30,000 amount and the basis is 50, if we just cash that out and put it into a investment account, they're going to start paying taxes on all that growth. We can put it into a Fidelity variable annuity. The basis is now $30,000, $50,000 basis. Because it's a like insurance product, we can recoup all of that back up to the $50,000 basis tax-free and avoid taxes on that $20,000 of growth, and then cash that out and transfer it into a taxable investment account. So that's the first thing from a asset standpoint, how to maximize that. And then we got new life insurance. One of the spouses, to make sure she had $3 million of coverage in place. Anything to add there? And then we'll talk about whole life recommendations too.
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. So the first purpose of life insurance obviously is make sure the death benefit's in place, but a second use case, you hear a lot of bad things and read a lot of bad things about life insurance, which is true. It's oversold. I would say 98% of the population should not own whole life insurance. You have these insurance companies and agents running around selling them to everybody that are not a good fit. So there's a lot of bad stuff out there. But for them, we have a lot of extra money being saved into a taxable account. Eventually, they're going to have to start holding bonds as they get closer to retirement. We implemented 2 cash value life insurance contracts that we're saving into, has a permanent death benefit, has a long-term care rider. They can use the death benefit tax-free for long-term care, and has a cash value that's going to build up tax deferred. And if you look at the rate of return of these long-term, it will be about 4 to 5%. So it's a nice bond alternative for somebody in this situation that has cash flow, has assets. We can save money inside of that contract for the tax benefits and the safety net of potentially getting a higher rate of return than bonds, and it's much more tax efficient than holding that in a taxable investment account.
So if I may kind of summarize fairly quickly, from a portfolio perspective, we've both optimized the upside via, by utilizing our investment principles, primarily asset location and asset allocation. But also we've capped the downside. For example, by utilizing whole life insurance, which again gets a bad rap and is probably not appropriate for the vast majority of the population. But in this case, for this couple, it made sense, both from a portfolio perspective, but also a high level of kind of financial planning and peace of mind perspective.
Yeah, and I think this is a good conversation too. So as someone's entering retirement, in their case, let's say they have 10 a month coming in, pension, Social Security, 10 a month if they're spending 20 is going to be drawn from their portfolio. So that's $120,000 a year. And we want, when they get to retirement, 7 years of that in something safe, cash, bonds, cash value. So 120 times 7 is 8 something.
840.
840. So when they get to retirement, we need, let's round up, say $1 million in something safe. We're going to be positioned to have 2 to 3 years of that inside these life insurance contracts in the next 10 years. We're going to have about, call it $300,000 inside of these contracts that satisfies, almost 3 years of spending. They can access whether the market. A lot of times, stocks and bonds work inversely. So if stocks drop, people flee to safety and buy bonds, increasing the price of bonds. 2022, really good example. Stocks were down double digits. bonds are down double digits. It's an uncommon year, but in a year like that, we could tap into the life insurance and draw on that if they needed anything and never have to sell stocks or bonds at a loss. And then when the stocks take a loan on life insurance, the stocks go up, use the stocks to pay off the life insurance. So just another, I would say, safety net to add onto the balance sheet of isolated or saving from sequence of returns risk and never having to sell anything at a loss because we have this safe cash growing.
Yeah, that's a great point, and let me touch upon this quickly. But the the concept of sequence of returns risk is that you can retire with a certain amount of money, and if the performance of that portfolio suffers in the early years, that can derail your financial plan for the next two to 3 decades, just based on those early years of underperformance in the portfolio. That is why that is a major reason why we recommend having 7 years of safe assets to protect our clients' portfolios from that sequence of returns risks. And within that kind of safe bucket, that can be, like you mentioned, cash, bonds, cash value life insurance, and things of that nature. So just to kind of recap that, which I think is exceptional.
Yeah. Well, anything we missed here, I think that's a pretty good overview of all the tactical planning and making sure goals are on track. And once all this was implemented, they could retire at 55 if they wanted to. They're not going to. One's probably going to work into 60. So now it's making sure that they, spend their money on the things they want and enjoy it how they want to in the years while they're working, while still saving for all those goals.
Yeah, and that was the overarching kind of problem we saw, was just to kind of give them the peace of mind to order Uber Eats that night, to understand that they are okay.
Yeah.
No, that might be funny because it's a small thing, but some of the other goals that we kind of touched upon were taking care of parents in the future, and we kind of we made it clear that they are able to do that based on their plan, and potentially in the future doing some charitable giving. So we kind of set that up as well. Do we want to touch upon that, the DAF, at all, or?
Yeah, we did a little bit, just taking appreciated stock, putting it in there, offsetting tax with the Roth conversion, and that'll be a year-by-year discussion based on income, Roth conversions, charitable amount. We got a sizable amount in the donor advised fund, should satisfy contributions for the next few years at least. And then more Roth conversions we may consider, probably do a little bit each year, but could also be if one spouse stops working the next couple of years like they think, that could be an opportunity, income's lower, to accelerate Roth conversions this year when there's a higher income, lower income.
Yep. Yeah, and then for the the charitable giving, that was something that they had kind of on the radar, but they again, go back to the spending question, they didn't know if they could. But based upon what we built for them, we've kind of illustrated to them that they can give away 10, 20 times more than they thought. And to go back to the point of, it's not just about how much money you have, it's what you do with it in the meantime. This is something that is important to them, and they're able to do it now. So
yeah, for sure. Anything else that we missed? I think that's a pretty good overview.
Yeah, I think we've covered it. Maybe lastly, just what are some indications for a quite complex situation like this when we look out? So I don't know, 3 to 5 years. Are there any metrics or indicators that we track to measure success for them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to make sure the investments are performing adequately and not underperforming a bunch of benchmarks. But that's table stakes in my opinion. It would be more so the wins would be, are they living a fulfilling life that they want to? Are they spending on the things they want while making sure their goals are on track? Or all these, which the recommendations will be implemented because they're working with us. We're very good about follow through and making sure it happens. But yeah, mainly just are they doing the things they want and not holding back on any spending because they don't know that they're okay, would be the main indicator to watch.
Yeah, freedom and peace of mind.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast, and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.